Halliday's power base. Friends and allies alike were criticizing or second-guessing him behind his back, and he had to wonder which one of them would be the first to sink the metaphorical knife into his back. But he'd been around long enough to understand that hope sometimes arrived in seemingly unpleasant forms, like a bed of nails. He was hoping Karpov's deal would provide the political capital that would at once restore his prestige with the president and his power base within the multinational military-industrial complex. As the trio on stage opened a box full of noise, Halliday once again mentally reread the file on Boris Karpov, as if this time he'd find some further information, anything, including a surveillance photo, no matter how grainy or out of focus, of the colonel. No such photo existed, of course. No more intel than the 4 threadbare paragraphs on the single sheet of paper watermarked top secret. Because of the administration's dismissive relationship with Russia, the NSA had limited knowledge of the workings inside the Russian political system, not to mention FSB-2, whose actual mission was highly covert, far more so than the FSB, the political inheritor of what had once been the KGB. "Mr. Smith, you appear distracted," the Russian said. They had agreed on using the pseudonyms Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones in public. The secretary's head swung around. He was profoundly uncomfortable underground, unlike Karpov, who more and more seemed to him like a creature of the dark. Raising his voice to be heard over the rhythmic clangor, he said,
"Nothing could be farther from the truth, Mr. Jones. I'm just taking in with a sightseer's bliss the particular atmosphere you've chosen."
The colonel chuckled deep in his throat.
"You have a droll sense of humor, yes? You have me entirely."
The colonel laughed out loud.
"We'll see about that, Mr. Smith. Since we do not even know our wives, it seems unlikely we should know our counterparts."
The small hesitation had Halliday wondering whether Karpov was going to say adversaries instead of the neutral word he'd chosen. He didn't bother to wonder whether the Russian was aware of his political position, because it didn't matter. All that concerned him was whether the deal about to be proposed would help him. The trio lurched into another tempo, the secretary's only clue that they'd segued into another selection, and he hunched forward over the 2 bitter beer he'd hardly touched. No Coors in this joint.
"Let's get on with it, shall we?"
Without delay. Colonel Karpov placed his hands on his golden forearms. The knuckles were scarred and yellow with calluses, which made them look as ridged as the Rockies.
"I know, Mr. Smith, that I don't have to explain who Jason Bourne is, yes?"
At the name, Halliday's expression hardened. He felt as if the Russian had sprayed him with Freon.
"Your point?"
he said woodenly.
"My point, Mr. Smith, is this. I will kill Jason Bourne for you."
Halliday didn't waste time in asking how Karpov knew he wanted Bourne dead. There had been enough NSA activity in Moscow the last month when Bourne was there to make it abundantly clear to a deaf, dumb, and blind man that he was targeted for termination.
"Very magnanimous of you, Mr. Jones."
"No, sir, not magnanimous. I have my own reasons for wanting him dead." At this admission, the secretary relaxed slightly.
"All right, let's say you do kill Bourne. What do you want in return?"
There was in what anyone else might be termed a twinkle in the colonel's eye, but to Halliday, who was still trying to get the measure of him, it seemed as if someone had walked over Bourne's grave. Death had winked at him.
"I know that look, Mr. Smith. I know you're expecting the worst, a high payment. But in exchange for you giving me license to take Bourne out with full immunity against the consequences of collateral disturbance or damage, I want you to eliminate a vexing thorn in my side, whom you can't terminate yourself."
Karpov nodded.
"You have me entirely, Mr. Smith."
The 2 men laughed at the same time, but their tones were absolutely different.
"So,"
Halliday made a tent.